We've known each other, I guess, we're getting on for 10 years, probably? 8 or 10 years?
8 to 10 years, knowingly.
Yes.
Or unknowingly.
Yes. And it's a privilege to know Tony, because he is such a superb modeller. Every word I wrote in the little resume that I put round, I think is absolutely true. He's one of the late Roy Jackson's Retford mob and has contributed a lot to Retford. In your time, well, you've been interested in doing your own hobby model railways all your life. You've done high quality commissions across the board, locos, coaches, scenery, signals, particularly in 4 mil, but you're now gaining a leaning towards 7 mil, and we keep trying to pull you into the 2 mil fold as well. And in recent years, you've become a good friend to Yeovil. You've taught me most of what I know, and Buckingham has demonstrated it. It's been a privilege to know that too. You built a good shed on Yeovil, which is beautiful, and almost brick for brick what the original was. And probably for the last year, you've been doing, on our modelling sessions, you've been doing engines.
Frighteningly, it's nearly 3 years.
3 years, isn't it? It is only some Tuesday evenings.
The earliest photographs of the Dean goods are nearly 3 years old,
Okay.
which is scary.
So I thought it would be interesting to get an experienced and highly competent modeller's view of coming into 2 mil from the larger scales. And it's a long time since we've been talking about locos. So I twisted Tony's arm, give him a free buffet, and he's going to talk about the 2 locos. And those are all the pies that are in the fridge.
Right. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for coming. I mean, Laurie's given me a nice build-up there and a nice introduction. I have to say I always feel a bit of an imposter when it comes to being sort of thrust into the limelight a little bit. I've always regarded myself as just a bloke who enjoys fiddling about with toy trains. I don't think I'm anything special in terms of my skills and my abilities. And I'm very lucky over the years to have rubbed shoulders with some really, really good modellers, people who are absolutely at the top of the game. People like Roy Jackson, Jeff Kent, my friend the late Malcolm Crawley. I've got to know Tim Watson a little bit because we run one of the courses down in Cincinnati together. So I've watched Tim building his locos, and I look at what people like Tim do, and I look at what I do, and I think I still have lots to learn. But we get there, we get by. How many of us started like this? Probably a few. My hobby began at this loco here. Oh, I've got a pointy thing, haven't I? Does this do a pointy thing as well?
Yes.
It's the red button, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Right, that little loco there, the old Hornby 00 Southern 060, that was my christening present. And my dad was a railway enthusiast long before I was born. He used to go out photographing railways and he would build model railways. My christening present, this wasn't our first ever layout, it's the first one I've got a photograph of. We had one previous to that. Even back then, the hobby for me was always about making things. Vast majority of what you can see on there is probably straightforward Hornby 00. I think that wagon there is a Pico wonderful wagon. You've got the super quick buildings. The wagon load there was a block of wood with paper lithographed sides stuck to it. But even back then, it was about making things. I used to get 2 shilling pocket money. We would go on Saturday into Lincoln, and there was a model shop called Knobs in Lincoln at the time, near the station. And every Saturday, I would go in with my dad, and of course the old Airfix kits, the old 2 bob kits. I just had enough pocket money to buy a kit. And we would buy a mineral wagon kit or something, and we would take it home, and I would sit with me dad on a Sunday, and we'd build the kit together, which was fantastic. So my very first sort of mentor in the hobby was my dad. As the years went by, I was lucky enough to say meet up with some very other good modellers as well. I won't bore you with the full story because it'd go on forever, but in the late 1970s I fell in with a bunch of modellers in Doncaster, Dale and Foreman Society, and I met a chap there called Tony Johnson, who we built an E-Engage exhibition layout together. And Tony was magnificent, and he was one of these people, you gave him a job to do, or there was a job to be done, he would throw himself at it, he would get stuck in, he didn't overthink things, which is something I'm quite guilty of sometimes. And his favourite saying, which probably needs translating for those not from me, don't be frit, don't be frightened. You know, what's the worst that can happen is that you get it wrong and you have to do it again. And so that was sort of number one lesson in the hobby for me. Don't be afraid to have a go. What's the worst that can happen? This layout, even though it was very, very simple, was a terminus station down this side, a continuous run there. Even then, it was based very, very vaguely on Buckingham. There's a terminus station and a through station, and we ran it with a timetable. You started off a train from the terminus, you would run it round, each circuit round the main line was a mile, and that's the East Coast main line. It doesn't look much like it, but that's the East Coast main line. So you would run so many miles around to reach Newark or Grantham or Peterborough or wherever, and that's why we got the A4. If it was an express passenger train, it had 2 coaches. If it was a local train, it had 1 coach. And the locos would come up, we didn't have a turntable or anything, but the locos would work back light engine to tender first to take the next train there, and we ran it to a timetable, and it was great fun. Later on, we have a slightly more advanced layout. The first picture was probably taken about 1967, something like that, 67, 68, I'd be 7 or 8 years old. By this time I'm about 14 probably. Loco there is a Kate's Bodyline J50, which was the first loco I ever built, fitted on, I can't remember if it was a triangle or a Hornby chassis. I think it was supposed to fit one and I put it on the other because the wheelbase was slightly closer. Glued together with Evo stick and painted with a big thick brush and some paint. But even back then, at that age, again, it was all about making things. That layout there, again, bears a vague similarity to Granborough Junction on Buckingham, because my dad had all the old railway modeller magazines going back to the 50s, and I used to read through and thumb through, and Buckingham was always my favourite layout. I always thought it was fantastic. I've never really had a long-term ambitious plan. I admire people like Laurie, I want to build Yeovil Town, that's it. No distractions, no side projects, no getting involved in other things. Roy Jackson with Retford, okay, built a few layouts before and then decided, right, this is going to be it, and just single-mindedly on with some, this is the big project. I've never had the big project. If I had one at all, it was to build something a bit like Buckingham. And then about 15 years ago, the opportunity came to have the real Buckingham. So I didn't need a long-term project after that. I got my ultimate model railway. I had a shed, built a shed specially in the garden for it, and so I was happy. So really, ever since Buckingham came to me 15 years ago, I've dabbled in bits of this and bits of that. I've built a couple of exhibition layouts. I've helped other people with their layouts. And it was probably, as Laurie said, around about 10 years ago. Mutual friend, a chap called John Phillips, who's one of the Retford mob, came to me and said, have you seen what Laurie's up to? I go, Laurie? Don't know anybody called Laurie. Oh, you'll know Laurie. No idea. Dr. Adams. Oh yeah, no, Dr. Adams. And Laurie had been my GP donkeys years ago, when he was a GP at Bawtry. And theoretically, he was my GP. At the time, I was young, fit and healthy. I don't think I ever saw him professionally. or if we did, neither of us remembers it. But I do look, when I look at my daughter's things, he did provide my daughters with injections and things like that when they were little, so it's way back when. But anyway, John put us in touch with each other, and Laurie came over to see Buckingham and started to come over regularly on a Tuesday evening. And then invited me over to come and see Yeovil, and I was mightily impressed. I thought, there's a project, what a magnificent project, and for one person to be doing all that single-handed is I think remarkable. He's double it up to 4mm size. It's a Retford-sized project. That would be a 70-foot thereabouts layout in 4mm scale. So it's,
Could I just say that an increasing number of friends have made very nice contributions to the overall.
Yeah.
I'm very proud.
yeah. Well, at the time, you were really just working by yourself, weren't you? Anyway, we ended up doing alternate Tuesdays. So I came to Laurie's one Tuesday, he came to me the next, and I said, well, you know, is there anything I can do to help? And I'd never done any 2mm modelling apart from, you remember, when did Graham Farish bring out their Engage? The early 70s? 72, 78, 60. It was as early as that, was it? Yeah, I don't know. But there was a spell round about then. Graham Farish brought out, there was a Great Eastern 060 tank. It was an awful thing, it ran like a pig. But my brother was interested in model railways a little bit, and he got a Graham Farish 060 shunter, the Great Eastern one. He got a Liber Deltic, which was an awful thing, it was nearer TT than 2mm scale. A Mini Trix plus 27 diesel. And we did start a little Engage layout, the two of us. So this is, you know, this is, say, probably about 72, 73, something like that. It all went downhill very quickly. One, because the stuff didn't run very well. And secondly, my brother has a ridiculously bad temper. And he was building a goods shed, a little Midland Railway goods shed. There were drawings in the railway model of this goods shed. He decided he wanted to build it, and he was going to build it in brick. And he cut out the body, made the body of balsa wood, got some brick paper, put some glue on it, stuck it down, picked it up, and he put the bricks vertically. Now, you know, it's a relatively minor, fairly easy to sort out, but my brother lost his rag, smashed the goods shed up, and smashed the start of the layout up. So the Engage project sort of ended there and then, although again, the locos and these are probably still in a drawer somewhere in my house, long lost. So there was a bit of a dalliance with Engage way back when. Anyway, so I started going to Laurie's and you know, is there anything I can do? And we decided that the easiest and most straightforward thing to do, Laurie got a drawer full of various kits and bits and pieces. I did that Southern cattle wagon first, didn't I? Yeah. And I had to go at this Southern cattle wagon with a plastic body and one of the association etched underframes. I thought, well, this is nice. This is I'm enjoying this. And one thing with me is I hate doing the same thing over and over again. I get bored. This is why so many of my projects go so far and then go no further. I get bored, I get itchy feet, I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. And doing something different is always refreshing, it's always new, I find it exciting. You learn new skills, new techniques, new materials, whatever. So I built this little Southern cattle wagon, seemed to be all right. And then when we finished that, what shall I do next? And there's a drawer full of how many cattle wagons, Laurie?
There's another 10.
Another 10. And what did I just say about not like repeating doing the same things? So I thought, well, I'll do something other than another cattle wagon. And so, at that stage, I don't think there were any buildings on the layout. There was no, very little sort of scenic. So I'll have that contribute a little bit to the scenery. So I started building the goods shed. And again, doing the research for it, different materials, different techniques, different sizes of things. You know, making little things like gutters and doors and windows that are so much smaller than anything I've ever dealt with before, and again thoroughly enjoyed it. It took a while, but we've ended up with a reasonable goods shed. And then came, where do we go next? Now it was about that time Laurie had acquired some bits from. Now was it Professor White?
I'm not sure, he was an ENT surgeon.
Right. Anyway, Tony White.
Yeah, he was a professor.
He was, yeah, Professor White. Now, Laurie had seen ages and ages and ages ago a T9 that he'd built, and you nearly bought it, didn't you, donkeys years ago? And then, for various reasons, it didn't happen at the time. And then an article appeared in the Model Railway Journal And the heading photograph in the article was this T9, and it mentioned in the article that he was still looking to find a new home for the T9. So lorry got in touch, T9 came along with a load of other bits, including some several sets of bits for part-built Dean Goods locos. Now, I had a close affinity with Dean Goods. When we lived at Carn in Wiltshire in the late 60s, it was just after the Carn branch had closed, and the station was still intact, and the track had been lifted, but all the buildings were there, and of course the Dean Goods were very much at home on the Carn branch. And one of my very first attempts at building a kit in 4mm scale had been a Kay's Dean Goods. I started off and wanted to model the Carn branch Great Western. And the Kay's kit, I must have been about 12 years old when I tried making it go. And the Kay's bits, remember the old frames with the keyhole slots and the pre-assembled, pre-ported wheels that went in and you push the bearings in? I couldn't get the flipping thing to run. I tried and tried and tried. I couldn't get it to go. I didn't have the knowledge, skills and abilities to make it go. And my dad was very good at doing things like plastic kits and whatever, but he was an engineer in charge of the Vulcan bombers fleet, but he couldn't make a 4mm loco go. So the Dean Goods got put aside in disgust. But I've always had a soft spot for the Dean Goods. And one of the locos that arrived was a part-built Dean Goods. And this is oh, ignore the bit top right, because that's the bit I did a bit later. That's the Dean Goods as it arrived. So the tender chassis was done, the loco chassis was pretty much done, the tender body was pretty much done. I thought, oh, I've only got to make a loco body, and we're on to a winner. So, all right, try and get it to run first of all. And I think I might have made that coupling out of a bit of brass rod with 2 holes drilled through and thinner brass wire put through to make the coupling. And I struggled and I struggled and I struggled and I could not get the thing running smoothly. It was a nightmare. I could get it so that the motor was driving, but the actual motion of the wheels was stuttery and lumpy, and every once in a while it would jam up. And I had a look. One of the first things was that the 6 driving wheels, you'd reasonably expect somebody to have put all 6 driving wheels the same in a loco. You know, it's pretty basic, and I don't know whether you can really see it on there, but the driving wheel on the far side, on the right-hand side, doesn't have as many spokes as the one on this side. You see the spokes are spread further apart. They were roughly the same diameter, within a few thou. One of the wheels had fewer spokes, and the crank throw was slightly different. Now, the spokes you can live with, the diameter you could probably live with, the crank throw, not going to happen. So that was one of the first problems we encountered trying to get the thing to go. I did make myself a rule many, many years ago that my modelling, I'm very, very happy building things, but my modelling was not going to involve taking on problem projects from other people and sorting them out. That's my number 1 rule, which was broken, smashed to smithereens in this particular instance. So again, that's a sort of a look at it as it was. So you notice that the tender is sloping up slightly at the back as well, which there wasn't really an easy way of sorting that out, because it was the correct height at the front, and it was the back that was too high. So that wasn't very straightforward too. I mean, the actual tender body itself was nicely modelled, and there was not a great deal wrong with it. Again, the mechanism. One of the other problems was that the gearbox, and I understand that at the time Tony White decided that he wanted to pass these things on and didn't want them anymore. I think he reached a point where he realised that his eyes and his hands were just not good enough anymore to do the sort of work that's needed to make things like this go. And to be fair, it showed. The driving wheel axles were not square across the frames, and there was a double reduction gear inside that gearbox that was fixed on the frames, and the gear shafts were not parallel. So the gears at one position of the revolution, the gears on one side were catching on the gears of the other revolution, creating a tight spot. So every time the wheels went round, tight spot, tight spots, tight spot. And I couldn't really see a way out of how to get rid of that. You say the tender itself was really nicely modelled. Not a great deal wrong with that, except that the outside boss of the wheels is touching the frames either side. There's absolutely no side play on the wheels, and it's a dead short because it's a metal body. So that needed a little bit of fettling, and that's the motor that was in there. Anyway, I thought, right, okay, while we sort that out, I'll have a little look at making some bits. Now, again, one of the aspects of the hobby for me that I absolutely love is learning new techniques, learning new things. Going into 2mm scale is again, certainly learning new things. I've got a very good friend called Vincent Worthington, whose his other hobby apart from other hobbies is buying and restoring lathes and milling machines. He's got probably over 100, I don't know, but he's got a good collection. And a short while ago, 2 or 3 years ago maybe, he got for me a little lathe. I've never used a lathe before in my life, but I thought, oh, this is an ideal opportunity to have a play with a lathe. Again, learning new techniques. So the boiler is turned from a solid brass bar, and that's my first ever turned chimney, which I'm quite pleased with that for a first effort. But again, it's a new technique. The base to sit on the smoke box was just done by taking a brass bar, putting it in a vise, and getting a half round file of the right diameter and filing the bottom. I'd seen somebody mention doing that in an article in one of the magazines, and I thought, well, it sounds very crude. You should be fly cutting this or something like this. Well, I'll give it a try and see if it works, and it seemed to work. So we had a go at making a chimney. The safety valve was again turned on the lathe. The footplate was something that came with a kit of bits. There was a load of bits from an N brass kit for a Dean Goods, which had clearly been designed to fit on a proprietary mechanism, and it was way too long and way too wide. It was about 4 or 5 millimetres too long and 2 or 3 millimetres too wide, which I thought was but Tony White had he'd obviously got a pantograph milling machine, and he'd milled the footplate and the balancers on that, and they were beautiful. So I think there's still another one or two bits, 1 or 2 sets of Dean Goods bits back at base. He'd done a new cab front as well. The cab sides are off the end brass kit, but he'd done a new cab front that was narrower. So we got say some very, very nice milled, profile milled bits for the bodywork. Firebox is just formed from nickel silver sheet, and you can see now at this stage the gearbox has got the worm in, and we're trying to get it to run smoothly, and failing miserably. Again, the dome. That's my second ever dome turning. The first one was also for the Dean Goods. Fell off my desk onto the floor and was never seen again. So I spent an hour looking for it, and I thought in an hour I could have made another one. So not quite happy. I think the flare into the base at the bottom could be better. But the Dean Goods is very strange because it's got a small boiler and a very big dome. And the dome comes a long way around the sides of the boiler. Smoke box door again was a little turning. the riveting on it, there's a smoke box wrapper, thin, although the smoke box itself was solid brass, it's got a thin wrapper, and right on the limit of what my riveting machine will do. You couldn't do rivets much closer than that to go with it. And so we're beginning to get the body together, looking a little bit like it does. The splasher fronts were from the end brass etch, but with new splasher tops. And it's beginning to look a bit like a Dean Goods. A few added details, sandboxes, lamp irons. The handrails, Laurie had some etched handrail pillars. Are they society ones? Are they association ones?
Yeah.
And it's like almost like a table tennis paddle, flat edge with a rounded end with a hole in it. And you had some turned ones as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
But I found the flat edge ones to be look a lot better on the finished loco. I mean, real handrail pillars are almost invisible, and even trying to turn one even in 2mm scale for a wire to go through, you do end up with quite a big blob on the end of it, which probably shouldn't be there. So that's the body about finished. Were commercial ones. I'm not sure where the buffers came from, but yeah, I think that's the whistles on top were 0.5, 0.6 brass wire, stuck in a mini drill and turned with a little file, which is fairly straightforward. Come on. So we then started hitting problems with the mechanism. First thing that happens, a new set of wheels. You notice those are the different wheels. So we've actually got 6 identical wheels on this one, which is a bit of a bonus. You see how big the holes are for the coupling rods. This is something that I've learned from rubbing shoulders with another 2mm modeller, Jerry Clifford. Again, I know Jerry through Miss Abbey, and Jerry and I actually work on a layout together because we do this professionally a little bit. And Jerry's motto on everything is put more slop in it. If it's tight, put more slop in it. Totally goes against everything that's in my nature in terms of engineering and working in 4mm scale and 7mm scale. But I've been opening the holes up anyway to try to sort out the previous wheels and the previous mechanism with the wrong crank throw. So we've got quite big holes in the coupling rods already. And I try and fitted them on the new wheels, and they seem to go around all right, so I thought I'll leave them alone. There's no point in trying to make things more difficult by putting smaller holes in. Round about that time, the association brought out a gearbox, a milled brass gearbox with, I think, 30-to-1 gears. And I'd looked at various 2mm mechanisms, and they seem to have a lot of gears in them. People seem to like lots of spurred gears and reduction gears and things like that. Well, I tend to think a little bit more simply than that, and I thought, well, if a single reduction worm and wheel will give us a reasonable speed, then that's what I'll stick with. And I put the thing together, ran it, put a shaft in the end with a motor on it, turned the controller on, and it seemed to go around quite nicely and smoothly. So I was quite happy with that. The one downside of the association gearboxes is the fact that you really have to assemble the whole thing, put it in, put the wheels in. And what you can't do is see, do the wheels go around smoothly? Because you've got the worm in already, and it's not easy to get the worm in and out. But luckily with the Dean Goods, because of all the problems I had previously with it, by the time we got to this stage, all the other problems have been sorted out already. So when we put the wheels and the motor on that, it seemed to go all right. We did experiment with a flywheel. Am I supposed to point this at that or at that? No, I'm supposed to point it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did experiment, or I did experiment with a flywheel. There was plenty of room in the firebox for the flywheel. You tend to like flywheels, don't you, Laurie?
Yeah, because I don't do DCC and
No.
stay alive. So.
But I found it very difficult to get the flywheel to run absolutely true. Because there was a little bit of play in the bearings at the front and the back of the gearbox, so the shaft can just move about a little bit, and it caused the flywheel to vibrate a little bit, and it wasn't quite as smooth with the flywheel as it was without it. So the flywheel went. Last little bit of the detailing of the inside of the cab. Luckily, there's a very, very nice preserved in goods in the museum at Swindon, which I've visited several times and taken photographs of. So there's plenty of information on what the inside of the in goods cab should look like. I can't claim that it's got all the details in there, but it's got enough so that it looks relatively busy. I wouldn't have liked to have been in the cab. Those bolts that are sticking up, they're the springs for the rear axle. I would not have liked to have been in a cab bouncing up and down on those. That would be a recipe for getting things trapped. But that's how they were. The springs were in the cab, totally unprotected like that. Which is okay, you know, it's a very, very old design, and hopefully things have moved on a little bit from there. So eventually we got to that sort of stage. Now you can see on the tender there, you can see where the outside frames, which were previously green, they're new outside frames. The old outside frames had been profile milled and were quite thick material. They were about 18 thou or something like that. By taking those off and replacing them with much thinner material, I was able to keep the outside frames in the same place, but introduce a little bit of side play and remove the electrical shorting.
And help it go around corners.
And help it go around corners. Yeah, it wouldn't go around a point, would it?
It wouldn't go around a corner.
The tender wouldn't go around a 1 in 12 point. Yeah. It would only go in a straight line. So that's the dean goods, and at the end we've got a little bit of video. Most of you have probably seen it running, but at the end I ended up with a loco that would pull a reasonable train, run quite smoothly, relatively quiet, and I have to say there were a few times during the journey that I thought we're never going to get there, but we did get there, and I have to say I'm very, very happy with it as a result. The theme of this talk, I'm not the best at finishing anything, so it's been like that now for how long? 18 months, 2 years? Only needs a coat of paint and number plates and lettering.
You got too friendly with Jerry, that's
I would have liked to have got the brake pull rod a little bit thinner, but I just couldn't think of a way of doing it thinner. If anybody's got any bright ideas on that, I'll be happy to listen to them. But that should really be a little bit thinner. But again, you know, I'm a 2mm virgin really with this, so the techniques and the methods that 2mm people use, I've learned some techniques from some people, but I certainly don't have all the answers, and I haven't learned all the methods that people use.
How big should it actually be?
I couldn't tell you offhand, but it should be thinner than that.
So I've got plenty of bits of not offcuts, but things out of the middle of edges.
I've got thin strip, but you've got to have a bit that you can drill a hole in to put the brake wire through.
Solder washer on?
Possible. It's possible. I did wonder about just soldering a bit of 0.4, some of your 0.4 square point rodding, just between the pins to see if that works. It's a possibility. So we got to that stage with myself, and it was right. What next? Now, the T9 that Laurie had acquired, I think it's fair to say it wasn't really a runner, was it? It's got the 8-wheel water cart tender, and the tender had been built rigid with no side play on any of the wheels. So the loco, the tender certainly wouldn't go anywhere other than in a straight line. The loco was really going to go anywhere. It was a similar sort of thing. It was built way too rigid. Lorry's always had a soft spot for T9s, and there was a need for a T9 or several for Yeovil. And Lorry had got a set of etchers that Worsley Works had done for a T9. And I thought, well, rather than try and fettle that one, why don't I do you a T9 next? So we did actually get started on a T9. That's a T9 tender from a set of Worsley Works etchers. So that was the next job. And then I started looking at the etchers for the body. Now, the Tony White T9 was clearly from a set of Worsley Works etchers. And I looked at it, I thought it doesn't look right. And the T9 had 6'9" driving wheels. The model had 6-foot driving wheels. That's quite a difference. Even in 2 mil scale, it's a noticeable difference. You start to look at the Worsley Works etchers, and if you put 6'9" wheels in the Worsley Works etchers, one, you would have to do a new footplate because the cutouts in the footplate are not big enough. The splashes were too small. The footplate was too short because if you put 6'9" wheels in, the driving wheel would stick out behind the cab, and it should be in a box in the cab. So it would have needed a new footplate, new splashes, and a new cab making. You didn't get a boiler, a firebox and smoke box in the etchers. You were supposed to make those yourself anyway. So basically it was going to be a scratch build. You were going to need new footplate, new cab, new splashes, new smoke box, new firebox, new boiler. There was going to be nothing left of the Worsley Works etchers. So in a moment of madness, the conversation turned to, oh, I'll scratch build one. And Laurie, bless him, saw the opportunity to jump in and said, well, if you're going to scratch build something, do you fancy doing something else? And me, feeling flushed with success after the Dean Goods, said, anything you like, Laurie, what do you want?
So, can I just say, it got to the stage of the T9 where your heart wasn't quite in it, was it?
Yeah. And there was the fact that there was the T9 there that could have been resurrected in the right hands. It's now gone. Is that gone to John Greenwood?
I think John Greenwood has resurrected it, although it's not come back.
So the T9's been to a proper 2 mil expert to be fettled, and will come back as a runner. It'll probably still have the wrong size driving wheels, but it will be a runner. So anyway, how about a U-class? Don't go on then. So we went from a parallel boiler, inside valve gear, inside cylinder, straightforward little 440, to a taper boiler, bell pair firebox, outside cylinder, outside motion, 260. But you get a bit smug sometimes. When something goes right, you feel as though you can tackle anything. So we started on the tender, which was really pretty straightforward. Laurie had got nice drawings, including some to 2mm scale. So the tender, dead easy. Just a box, cut out a nickel silver. What did it that? Started adding a few details. Nothing really very exceptional about it. The buffers are commercial. The axle boxes, I think, are actually technically Great Western ones, but I'm blowed if anybody's going to spot the difference. The tender filler in the back was literally 30 seconds work in the lathe. A couple of toolboxes. Few added details from strips of wire and things. The brake handle, I think, was a commercial lost wax capsule with the handles shortened considerably because they were a bit bigger than they ought to be, and I think with the height altered. The beading put on around the top of the tender, when you get multi-strand wire, you take a single strand of thin multi-strand wire out, you get nice copper wire. It's nice and thin and relatively easy to solder and pull along as you run the soldering line on the top, and let the soldering line push the copper wire down onto the edge. So that was a little bit easier than it might have been.
Easier than what?
Well, a little bit easier than trying to actually hold something in position
Oh, I
and
see.
solder it. The soldering, you tap it at one end, and then you just follow it along with the soldering line as you go. So you only need 2 hands.
I think I only got two.
I did ponder long and hard about how to do you do it with little bits of 0.3 wire and try and bend it to shape first and then put it on, and I didn't fancy that. So I think that's a technique I've seen Tim doing on one of his loco cabs. Was doing it with fine copper wire. So I think that was a technique from him. So I was quite pleased with the tender. But I didn't take any photographs of the early stages of the construction of the loco, which is a bit of a shame. But the frames went together reasonably easy. They were just cut out of. Again, this is from looking at what people like Tim Watson do. Fairly thick frames. I think there might even be 1mm thick brass. So I haven't bothered putting other bearings in. So the 2 frames were cut out together as a pair and then drilled through. The cylinders, I had 3 attempts at building the cylinders, I think. We did get some etched bits. There was a set of association etched bits, I think, for upgrading the Graham Parish N class. And then Bruce in Australia did a set of etchers for lorry for a U class. So we had 2 sets of etchers produced, which had various valve gear bits. And one of them, and I can't remember which one it was now, also had bits for the cylinder. But I really, really struggled trying to solder the cylinder up from several tiny bits of etch. I had 3 or 4 goes, and every time I would solder one bit on, the other bit would fall off. I tried using different melting point solders. I ran out of melting points for different solders. So in the end, the cylinders are filed up from a block of solid brass, and the covers front and back are little turnings on the lathe. The coupling rods, the association do an etch with about 4 or 5, maybe 6 different wheelbases of coupling rods. One of them was absolutely spot on for the U class, which was lucky. So we have fluted rods from which are, I think, stainless steel. So you can solder little retaining washers on and not solder the rods up solid. You've got to be flipping good at soldering to solder stainless steel. I'm good, but I'm not that good. The foot plate, the valance is a 2x1 strip of brass on edge, so it's a nice solid valance.
Tony, on the coupling ones, have you left quite a hole as well there?
They've got smaller holes than the Dean goods.
Yeah, but they've still got a
Little bit of a hole. One thing I did find is that the driving wheels, these are the driving wheels with the cast brass centres and the steel tyres. I don't know whether they're the current ones or whether they're still available, but the ones that Laurie had in stock.
No, the Mark 4 or Mark 5, I think the Mark 6 ones that are going to...
They're grey 3D printed centres now, aren't they?
3D printed
Yeah.
steel, I think.
Yeah, which is what's on the Dean goods
Yeah.
now. I did find that the very nice, the run true, but I did find that the coupling rod, the holes for the crank pins, were not drilled in exactly the same position on each wheel. Now, if you've got a driving wheel, you've got the hole there and you've got the crank there. Now, if that hole is drilled directly above the driving wheel and it's in the same place, you end up with an equal crank throw. If it's up there and offset slightly to the side, you end up with a slightly longer crank throw. And there's 1 or 2 of the wheels on here that the holes were not just in the centre; they were just offset to the side of the web. So Yeah, we did end up with a little bit of enlargement in the holes, but not nearly as much as on the Dean goods.
And that seems to be curing it in both cases.
Certainly does. So again, you know, it's a new technique I have to learn, or I have learned. You know, be willing to put slop in there. You know, I look at what, you know, I've seen Jerry's locos run. They run beautifully, and they run beautifully because he puts lots of slop in them. So you know, can't say that he's doing it wrong. It works. Say it's not my natural way of doing things at all. But again, part of this is all about learning new stuff and learning new techniques. So that's all part of it. The cab, I made the cab front first because you can judge that on the drawing. You know, that's nicely on the drawing. And then to make the wraparound, I used the cab front, put it down on a bit of paper and rolled it round to get the length from one side to the other, and then use the drawing to add the curve bit, to add the extension at the back end. And I like to think there was a bit of skill involved in getting the cab right first time. When I used to sit and work with my friend Malcolm Crawley, and he used to struggle to get his mechanisms to run. And table opposite each other, he would be working on a loco, I'd be working on a loco. He'd put his loco together, he'd put it on the test track, run it on down, and it would be lumpy, and he'd have to fiddle with it, and adjust the quartering, and adjust this, that, and the other. And for about 4 locos in a row, I put them on the track, I ran them on down, and it was smooth first time. And he said, one time he looked at me and said, "Jammy G strikes again." And I said, "Malcolm," I said, "how many more times do I have to do this before you accept there might be an element of skill involved?" He just looked at me and shut up, which he didn't do very often. So yeah, the cab. I think I had to make 2 cab fronts. I made a mess of the drilling out the windows in the front, because there are 2 or 3 different arrangements of cab windows in the front spectacle and new classes. There were different batches of locos that had different shape cutouts in different places, and I did one from the wrong batch of engines, and then the second one I managed to drill the hole slightly, one slightly higher than the other. So I think it took 3 goes to get a good cab front, but the wraparound was first time, which is unusual for me, but I enjoyed the moment.
So what thickness metal did you use, Tony, and how did you cut it?
10 thou nickel silver.
Right.
And I transformed my modelling a few years ago. And again, it's all about knowing the right people and talking to the right people. I was at a model railway exhibition with Vincent Worthington. He was a tool maker, and as I say, he has all these laser milling machines and things. And I was at a model railway exhibition, and I was going to buy some piercing saw blades off Eileen's Emporium. And Vincent said, don't touch them. And I've been using them for donkey's years, and I can hack my way through metal with them, no problem at all. And he said, no. He said, get these. And he pointed me in the direction of a Swiss velour blades from a firm called HS Walsh, who sells supplies to the clock industry.
Right.
And they do blades down to, I think, 80 blade size, which is about like a human hair. And I could get a piece of metal now, and I could cut a 6-inch dead straight line that doesn't need cleaning up with a file afterwards. And it's nothing to do with an improvement in my skill. It's down to having the right gear to do it. And these velour blades are so good that they absolutely transform my cutting out of metal. I built that's O-gauge loco there. Is a scratch built LD ECR 060. All that work on there was done with one blade. Didn't break any blades. And the blade actually went blunt at the end. It actually went blunt before I broke it. and they are fantastic. And I would absolutely recommend them to anybody that's interested.
Their fines are equally pleasant to use.
Yes.
Quality tools.
Yeah, yeah. Again, going to engineering exhibitions and model railway exhibition with Vincent, he knows his way around this stuff so well.
Which ones did you mention, Alan?
The log files.
Oh, files. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, little
Yeah.
Chalk and cheese. You wouldn't believe what a difference it makes.
Right.
And where did you get these from?
I get them from a HS Walsh, who have a website. You can order stuff online. I think they're in Birmingham somewhere. I'm not sure.
Cookson in Birmingham as well.
Cookson's, yeah. But stuff that's sold for watchmaking and jewellery industry is so much better than the stuff that we get for more railways. I've got a set of, I think, 60 and 80. And of course, one of the things with piercing saw blades is the thinner the metal you cut, the closer together your teeth have got to be.
Yes.
You really want at least 2 teeth on the metal at any one time, so the metal's not going into the gap between the teeth. And these 80 blades allow you to cut thin metal really easily. And yeah, as I say, that's absolutely transformed. So they're my cutting. A little close up of the scene. And then we start messing about with the valve gear. The connecting rod again is off one of the etchers, and I can't remember which one it is I use. Whether it's probably the one for the U class, because the N one would be a different length, wouldn't it? I think. I don't know. I'm not a southern expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the connecting rod for the N class is a little bit shorter. The slot is a length of, I think, 0.8 millimetre square brass, and Laurie had got some square tube, which was just a nice sliding fit over it. Lump soldered on the bottom of the tube, hole drilled in for the piston rod, another hole drilled through for a pin for the connecting rod. All the other components of the valve gear, I think 1 or 2 of them should possibly be fluted. I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. I looked at the bits that were on the etchers. One of the etchers, the ends were so small that you couldn't drill a hole in them sensibly. And the other one, the rods were really thin and they had great big bosses on the end that just didn't look right. So I ended up, again, using the drawing, thin nickel silver sheet, drill the holes in, and then cut them out with a piercing saw. And you can cut that little bits that small with those piercing saw blades relatively easily. I don't think I had to make one bit twice because it went ping and flew into orbit.
With a go.
Yeah, somewhere. And then they're assembled with, again, you buy them online, are they 0.3, 0.5 brass rivets? I bought 3 sizes, 0.3, 0.5 and 0.8. I think I ended up using the smallest ones. I think the 0.3 brass rivet. And another little trick for assembling things like that, you can see, like, I've got this hand, I can do that. See, that end of that is blackened, and that end of that is blackened. If you use the flux that I use, which is a paste flux called Templars Telex, you can chemically blacken one of the bits, and you can put the rivet through, you can solder it onto the other bit, and it will not solder to the first bit. It leaves the first bit totally free. If you use phosphoric acid flux, it eats the blackening off, and it will solder the whole lot up solid. But if you use a nice mild paste flux, so you don't need to put bits of paper in between or bits of foil in between or anything. You can get a really nice tight joint that will move like that with no slop or play. And it gives a really nice movement with no slop and no danger at all of soldering the thing up solid. So So that's the
What flux did you say that was?
Templar's Telux is the one I use. I get mine direct from a firm called George W. Neal, supply it. Get it in grippy tubs like that, or you can get little tins.
I've got some tins back you can have a look at. In fact, one that's almost finished you can take away for a trial if you want to.
Yeah.
And you get it from RS and other places as well.
Do RS sell it now? They didn't
I think
used to.
so.
All right. They've
Certainly
bought
if you
one.
Google it, there are several
Is it a
places.
rotor-based paste?
If I don't know what's in it, if I had to hazard a guess, I would suggest it's even something like animal tallow, which is what people used to use for soldering flux, donkeys years ago. It's a plumber's flux. It's soluble in water. It'll wash off with hot water. And I use it for. The only thing I don't use it for is low melt soldering. If you turn your iron temperature down to whatever 170, 180, so you can solder white metal, the Telux does not boil and activate at that sort of temperature. It needs to be a bit hotter for it to do its stuff. So I still use phosphoric acid flux for low melt soldering. But for any brass, nickel, silver soldering now, I use it all the time. I use it for track, I use it for making signals, I use it for all sorts.
Where do you get the rivets from?
I just looked online at 0.5 millimetre brass rivets or 0.3 millimetre brass rivets, and I found a firm that had various different sizes, and I bought a selection to try. I'll probably use the 0.8 ones in 4mm or even 7mm work, and use the smaller ones in 2mm.
It's not hollow rivets.
Sorry?
It's not hollow rivets.
No, it's a domed head, and a solid. You could bash them on the other end. I prefer soldering them because you can take them apart if you need to afterwards. I also on some of them actually file the heads flat so they won't domed, which probably a bit sad. From there, of course, you notice which is didn't mean to do that. Which is a feature of some things. You notice the return crank faces backwards, which is not massively common in railways, but is a feature of the southern various southern railway designs. Actually, I think, does it indicate outside admission cylinders?
Yeah.
For them that knows technical stuff. So we're sailing along quite happily with this. We've got it running reasonably. Again, there's another one of the association gearboxes there. And on this one I thought to myself, now having seen what speed the Dean Goods ran at, thought the U's got a little bit bigger wheels. It might be a little bit too fast. And there was talk of the association doing a 38:1 version of the gearbox. And I thought, waited a little while. I thought, doesn't seem to be any sign of it coming. So the only difference really is the size of the gear wheel. And the mesh is the same, the worm wheel's the same, the gear wheel's bigger, it's got more teeth. So I had a look, and the lorry had got some of the 38:1 gears in stock. And if you filed a couple of edges off the inside of the gearbox and raised the worm shaft up slightly, you could convert the association gearbox into a 38:1 gearbox. So that's why that's got those bearings soldered in. Because I opened up the holes, moved the gear wheel up, and put the 38:1 gear in. So far so good. Working reasonably nicely. Now again, one of the things I like to do when I'm building a model is to see that all this lot rotates smoothly just by turning the wheels around by hand or by pushing it along a bit of track. You can't do that when it's got the worm wheel in. And the worm wheel's got to go in there at quite an early stage. You can't put the valve gear on. You could put the valve gear on, strip it all down, then put the gearbox in and put it all back together again. So I was sort of taking it a stage at a time and got it working reasonably well. And then these things, they always come back and bite, don't they? They never go quite as smooth as they might. Put the body on, tried it, dead short. So the foot plate was touching the tops of the cylinders either side. So again, happened to be with Jerry Clifford. Jerry says, little bit of tissue paper, soak it in super glue, stick it on the top of the cylinders, job's a good one.
Cigarette paper.
Even cigarette paper, yeah. When we say tissue, you know the tissue that etch kits come in, not toilet tissue paper, the very thin tissue paper that etch kits come in. So, I'm at Lorries one Tuesday evening. Have you got some super glue? Yeah, got some super. Got some tissue? Yeah, got some tissue. Cut a little strip out of tissue. Cut it to fit the top of the cylinders. Got the top off the super glue. It's a bit bunged up. Got a pin. Poking the pin in like this to clear the top of the bottle of super glue. Pulled the pin out and a squirt of super glue, and I saw it. It shot across from the top of the bottle and landed right in the gearbox. I could try that 1,000 times and not pull that off again. It went because there's virtually no room between the frame of the gearbox and the gear wheel. You couldn't get a bit of paper down either side of it, but you can get a blob of super glue down there. Dead easy. And next time, I hadn't seen where it. I'd sort of seen it had gone in the direction of the engine, and I sort of looked for it, and I picked it up and looked for it. And can't see it. Can't see it. Must be all right. Stuck the. Put it on the track, and the whole thing was jammed up solid. So, oh dear. I thought to myself, oh dear. So,
Yeah.
there was a fighting chance. The plan was that by today, this loco was supposedly significantly finished. But this did set us back, or set me back, a little while. So, anyway, I thought then there's an opportunity here to take a few steps back and also to do away with one of the problems that I perceived. And what we've got now is the association gearbox has gone. And what I've done now is I've put 2 Tufnell spacers front and back of the centre driving wheel. I've made 2 brass plates to go on top, soldered 2 little bits of brass tube to the brass plates, made it as a continuous one to make sure it's lined up, and then cut it. And those brass plates screwed to the top of the Tufnell blocks. So I can now take the whirl wheel off, and I can spin the wheels around by hand. And I'm happy now. I'm happy now. So,
Was debonder not have done my trick for you?
do you know something? It might have done. It might have done. Put a bit of acetone or whatever down the gap. It might have done. But I was never entirely happy with the fact that I couldn't turn the wheels round. And I'd been sort of umming and ahhing about taking the gearbox out anyway. So it sort of tipped me over the edge and made the decision for me. But you're right, it might have done. I don't know whether it would affect the plastic muffs. I don't know. I mean, the stuff that the plastic muffs have made from looks pretty bulletproof.
Yeah.
So it may not have done.
Well, it's a good job it was you and not your brother, wasn't it?
Well, one of my associations over the years was say about 20 years ago I got involved with the late great Roy Jackson. Roy destroyed several models. Things would get thrown at walls.
Yeah.
I can remember he was one time he was working on an etched carriage, and he was struggling with some aspect of this etched carriage, and he was fiddling about with it and fiddling about with it and fiddling about with it, and he lost his rag with it, and he just picked the carriage up, bent it in half, chucked it in the bin, and said he won't effing do that again, will it? And I think, well, it wasn't even something he built, it was something that somebody else had built and given to him. And it was there. So, yes, yeah, good old Roy.
Please, could I have my carriage back?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that photograph may even have been taken. Was that taken on Tuesday night? I think it probably was.
Might have been.
So Tuesday this week, we actually got the valve gear on both sides. You can see there's actually a little gap there between the cylinder and between the motion bracket and the bottom of the frame. That's the foot plate is just packed up ever so slightly to give you that insulation. I couldn't resist that. It's got sort of Romney Hyde and Dymchurch vibes. I was working on some Model U 4mm figures, painting some Model U 4mm figures at the same time as I was working on the tender, and it just seemed a little bit of a too good an opportunity to miss.
So really, you're not putting that nice wire across the top of that
He is.
that way.
Yeah, he's polishing it.
I've got it.
He's polishing it. Few lessons from sort of dabbling in 2mm scale. First is from rubbing shoulders with Laurie and Jerry Clifford and Tim Watson is knowing what's achievable and what's not, knowing what to leave off, what to put in. The second is using techniques from other scales and gauges, and equally transferring techniques from 2mm to other scales. There's a little engine down here which is a Millwall extension railway 240 tank that I'm scratch building for somebody, and it's a 4mm engine. In 4mm scale, it's got a 10mm diameter boiler. It's got a 2'6" diameter boiler in real life, and the bloke wants it to run. And you think, how bloody hell am I going to fit a motor and gearbox in that? Well, that's what you think when you think in 4mm scale. You think in 2mm, you get bags of room in there, isn't there? and so that's got a tram fabric 8mm can motor, which happens to fit onto a high level 4mm scale gearbox. And the boiler slides over the motor, and the drive is complete, even though there's sort of bags of daylight round and through everything, the motor and the drive is completely hidden within the loco. Now, before I started mixing with 2mm guys, I wouldn't have had a clue about how to do that. The other is, and I don't think I haven't brought a loco that illustrates it, but the handrail pillars, the etched handrail pillars with a hole in it, I've built 2 4mm Great Central locos, and I've made handrail pillars like that. Strip in nickel silver, drill a hole, file it to this point, round the end off, and they're so much finer than even the finest commercial handrail pillars. And they look so much more, when you look at a photograph of the real thing and look at the model looks like the real thing now. It doesn't matter how good you are at turning handrail pillars, even in 4mm scale, trying to get them to a dead scale size is a nightmare, because the actual head that goes around the wire is so small. But with this, you can solder it onto the wire, file it round till there's virtually nothing around the wire, and you end up with a virtually scale size handrail pillar. So there's all sorts of techniques and things that can sort of transfer from one scale to the other. I don't know that I've transferred any 2mm scales to 7mm yet. Can't think of any.
Early days.
Well, there'll be something. There'll be something. Now, how do I get from here to the? Hang on a second. Have I done these out of order? Just one second. Oh yeah, the changed order on the That again was if the Dean Goods was my first turn chimney, that was my second turn chimney. So the smoke box again is solid brass with the door turned on it as part of it. Looking through stocks of brass, I didn't have any brass rod that was the right diameter, but Laurie had some tube that was exactly the right inside diameter for the solid brass plug to go in it, and was exactly the right diameter outside. So that's why there's a tube of brass that goes around the outside of the door. Lovely about it, isn't it? So that's it for the slideshows. Now how do I get to the video?
You have to exit out
Would you like to do the honors? Would you like to do the honors?
Get the expert from you.
Yeah. They say the ultimate lesson is always about trying new things, learning new things. How many of us here have actually scratch built a loco or would like to scratch build a loco? How many have actually built a loco from scratch?
Just me.
What did you do, Laurie?
I built 1.5.
What did you build?
The M7.
The M7.
The M7 and the chassis for the S15, both of which are now 45 years old. So,
Yeah, it's a dying art. I think we were chatting about it earlier, the advent of things like 3D printing, CAD drawing and 3D printing. Now, who's the chap who's building St Pancras? I can't remember his name. Not
Gary Fletcher.
Gary Fletcher. Gary Fletcher. Here we are. Look.
Very nifty on the reverser.
Yes. So yeah, he needs coal in the tender, he needs a driver and fireman, and some paint, and some number plates, and some lettering on the tender. I'll get it one day. That's the good show on the left there that talked about earlier. Yeah, Gary booked into one of the Missenden modelling weekends, and it was a weekend when the other tutor was supposed to be Tim Watson. And of course, Gary's into his 2mm Finescale in a big way. And he mainly booked on the course to spend a weekend with Tim Watson learning a few 2mm tricks. And right at the last minute, something had cropped up with Tim and he was not able to come. So they found a substitute, second tutor, who was not a 2mm man. So Gary turned up and he got these lost wax, brass, cast one-piece loco bodies, and he'd 3D printed the locos, and then he'd used those as a pattern for casting the body in 3D brass, in lost wax brass. And he'd got these, beautiful. I can't remember whether it was a Midland 2/4 or a Midland single, and he'd got this one piece. All he needed to do was drill holes and put handrails on it. The chimney, the dome, everything was all just this one piece casting. And I thought, that's a clever use of technology.
A short section of the discussion here has been muted simply because it contains references to third parties which I've been unable to cross-reference with them.
Stone tree lorry at last.
Oh, Caroline Street, yes.
Yeah.
So that was the Dean Good. The U class is still very much at trial stage. Now, I think this was before the MAG gear was put on,
Yeah,
before the gear,
before the side
glued up. So that's got the original gearbox in.
Worked very well, didn't it?
I was getting there with it. I was getting there. The problem was you couldn't test for, as you were assembling the valve gear and the motion, you couldn't test for freeness as you were assembling it, which is my normal way if I'm working in 4mm or 7mm. Put a bit on, test it. Put a bit on, test it. Put a bit on, test it. Well, it wasn't so easy on this.
my apologies to the video here.
Well,
This is my video and it's shaking all over the place, but at least you might see how it goes. If you want to come back afterwards,
Yeah, this
we can run it
was
then.
Tuesday night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is
Late
with the
Tuesday.
new gearbox
Late Tuesday.
and with the cylinders and the motion on.
Late Tuesday at battery out to down in 5 seconds.
Yes, of course you were there, weren't you? You were- But I was hoping for today, if we hadn't had this set box with the gearbox in it, I'll have to be stripped down there. I was hoping to have the pony truck on, the boiler and the firebox fitted, the dome on, I've made the dome, buffers on, and it would begin to look substantially complete. But I mean, it's clearly on the sort of last few bits and pieces to do now. Even with the 38:1 gearbox, or 38:1 gears,
That's
just a
flat
single
out.
reduction. That's fast enough, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
flat out.
It's only got to go 40, 50 miles an hour
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and only briefly on the open.
A little bit noisy, but the tender driving, oh, we get a bit of a haulage test. And it's a testament to lorry's track laying.
Four-wheel wagon in the middle.
Yeah, well, it's a converter wagon because they've got different sorts of couplings on the two sets of carriages. But I haven't got a coupling on the locomotive yet. It's a testament to lorry's point work and track that you can propel that lot round at that speed, and there wasn't a stutter or a bump or a lurch anywhere. That's why it's I've been very lucky over the years to be involved in some very good projects with people. With Roy and Retford and now Sandra and Retford, with Ken Hill and Narrow Road. You see the return cranks actually come loose on the you see it's flopping about a bit. Again, soldering onto a steel pin, not the easiest. That's shaking off. Both at once. And say I've been involved with Thompson's End with Malcolm, Narrow Road with Ken Hill. I've had several exhibition layouts myself. There's Ticking the Wadworth and Mansfield's about 8 to 10 different exhibition layouts. It's too many to really go through them all. But yeah, I've been very, very lucky to have a lot of. All my best work has been done in collaborating with other people. Working by myself, I'm pretty useless. I get distracted, I get waylaid, I get onto all sorts of side projects. Now that I don't have a big project of my own, I'm very happy to enjoy myself, to be what I'm doing, as long as I'm sitting making something, whether it's a U-class for lorry, whether it's a station building for Retford, whether it's some stuff for Narrow Road. As long as I'm sitting making things, I'm happy. It's a wonderful hobby that we have here. You get to learn all sorts of skills. More importantly, you get to meet lots and lots of very, very good people. I'm very lucky to have been involved with the things that I've been involved with, including contributing a little bit to Yeovil Town, which I think is a marvellous project. Anyway, has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask?
Try sometimes with the worm gearbox arrangement, just putting a little bit of the rod in from each side of the worm so you can pull it out
I hadn't tried that, no.
It then allows you to do
Yeah.
what you say, Tony, in terms of being able to run it
Yeah.
freely
Yeah.
to check that things are working.
No, good idea. Good idea. Haven't tried that. Haven't thought of it. No. I don't know whether I'd use those. I don't know whether I'd use those gearboxes again. I think I'm happier with this, with the second arrangement in the U. I was giving it some thought between Tuesday and today. I was thinking, if I had a completely free hand, what would I do? And I was sort of looking at what people like Graham Farish are doing nowadays. They seem to manage to get the motor in the loco, and they seem to manage to get enough weight to get good haulage and things like that. If I had a completely blank canvas to work from, and if the parts were available, I would probably be tempted to do a solid mill brass chassis rather than split frame.
Yeah.
I'd probably have the motor mounted vertically in the firebox with a single worm and drive onto the axle. And I'd be quite happy putting pickups on. If it's a tender loco, I'd do the tender split frame and pick up of all 6 tender wheels.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's insulated wheels available. Now, the idea of putting the motor in the tender, it sort of dates back to the days when you couldn't get motors that were small enough to put in a loco. And the 2 mil community has sort of stuck with that. But to me, it's an added complication. I mean, the Dean Goods had 8 or 9 drive shafts. They were slightly too long, slightly too short. You know, they would bind. They wouldn't go around a corner. 2 just disappeared into orbit because, again, I learned from Jerry a way of anchoring them by putting a pin through the loop to hold them in place.
Yeah.
Before that, you test the motor. Now, if the shaft was slightly too short and it came out of the socket on the loco and the motor was still spinning, gone. You know, never see that again. You know, one day somebody will clear out my shed and they'll find 2 or 3. They'll find a Dean Goods dome, several drive shafts. It will be enough to build another loco. But yeah, I think if putting the 4 mil head on, I think a solid mill brass chassis with just a slot for the gear wheel, get lots of weight in there where you want the weight, and if there were axles without the muffs, so you didn't need to have holes between the frames for the muffs, just an axle through wheels, you can get such fine, say, beryllium copper sprung wire now for pickups, which gives a superb pickup with virtually no braking effect on the wheels. So the benefits of picking up off a split frame, I don't think are what they were sort of 30, 40 years ago when we were using fairly stiff phosphor bronze wire for pickups.
It's the problem that because the association wheels being sort of designed for split axle, they're not insulated.
No, exactly.
You
exactly.
can't go down
So I don't think at the moment there's the opportunity to try that.
No, you end up having to use the muff to join the axles together.
Yeah. Of course, there are people now doing 3D printed wheel centres, like the association ones now are 3D printed metal centres, aren't they? Fused metal centres. Whatever. Now, if the wheels like that, with all like that, but with a plastic centre, now okay, they're still on stub axle, aren't they? So that's not a lot of use. You need to drill them out, put an axle through. So there's still to do. But I must say, I would, if there's one method of assembling a 2mm mechanism that I would like to try, it would be something like that.
But what's the logo for you?
Whether you can do that using something like, I mean, Graham Farish don't use split frames, do they? So whether their wheels could be altered, turned, new tyres put on.
Interesting you should say things like that, because one of the things that I was going to talk to Laurie about was that I have some of the locos that Keith Arms built.
Oh yeah.
And he turned down the Dapol wheels or Farish wheels and put new tyres on them. And I haven't quite worked out all that he's done to it.
Yeah.
But,
So it's a possibility, it's been done.
well, except you really need to be quite skilled at using a lathe, I think, to do that.
I'm lucky in that I have people like Mr. Worthington. You see, I can have a drive over to Bolton, and I can sit with Vincent, and Vincent works to, sort of 0.001 of a thou, and he's got lathes that were in use by the nuclear energy research departments
Right.
that are this
Yes.
long
Yes.
and are accurate to nothing, no error over the length of it. So he can turn stuff. He's got the skill to do it, and he's got the kit to do it. I could go over and spend a day with Vincent and come back with an absolutely beautiful set of wheels ready for action. So I don't think I could do it. I think my lathe skills are basic, to say the least.
And automatic these days.
If you knew, of course, Colin's got a CNC machine. We know a bloke with a CNC milling machine. So if you did the drawings and set it up. The association, don't they sell the steel tyres separately?
Yes.
I think they do. So the opportunity is there to fit wheels. So if when this sodding thing is eventually finished, which may be sometime this century, if I'm daft enough to volunteer to do another one, we might go down that route. What's next, Laurie?
Well, there are usually about 6 or 7 use.
Oh, God. What did I say about not liking doing the same thing twice?
Going down the route of mill chassis,
Yeah.
I think is because I do sort of modelling with Pete Kerman,
Oh, yes,
who does
yeah.
York,
Yeah.
and we're great fans of sort of solid chassis
Yeah.
just to get the weight,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm afraid my coaches weigh such a lot that you need something
Yeah.
with loads of weight
Yeah.
to pull them, and that's one of the ways of getting
Yeah.
weight in.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Or even better is to make the chassis out of copper tungsten.
Yes.
Are those split chassis though?
Yes.
Oh, they are.
Yes, you
last, yeah.
Yes, a bit like the association chassis that there are for the Manor Hall and so on, the Great Western ones. It's using that same sort of idea, but for...
Does he like it? Put a slot and put some insulation in it?
Yes,
Yeah.
so you use a big block one side and a thin piece
Right.
the other side, and then you just sort of glue it
Yeah.
together with some insulation.
Yeah.
But if we had insulated wheels, it'd just be so much simpler to have a single block, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Put an axle
yes.
set through.
Yes.
I mean, Neil Ballantyne, decades ago, had plastic-centred wheels.
Yeah.
I guess there'd still be some in glory boxes, with some...
I'm going to set for an 08.
you know the horrible class 4 that's on the oval?
Yeah.
I think that's, well, it's all a bit overscale and
Yeah.
too long and too fat and the rest of it. But those wheels, I think, were old Neil Ballantyne wheels in there because it uses the Farish chassis block to drive it.
Yes. I have a few.
Yeah, but going back to your idea of just putting the tyres on, I mean, there are 2 problems with the N-gauge wheels,
Yeah.
which are much less than they used to be some
Yeah.
20 years ago. One is the thickness and depth of the flange,
Yeah.
and the flanges are still too thick.
Yeah.
Okay, you can turn those down at the back.
Yeah.
They're much shallower than they used to be, and sometimes you can get them that will just not bottom out on the chairs.
Right.
But you can take that down as well. But the width of the tread is difficult to deal with. Now, I think you could get away with that with your suggestion, because if you just
Tyre on
turn
the
the
outside
whole
edge.
of the tyre and the flange off and left it square,
Yeah.
sort of square in profile,
Yeah.
and then put the 2 mil association wheel treads on,
Yeah.
what you would see, and what would be shiny, would be the correct width of tyre
Yeah.
with the correct profile.
I might be wrong, but I've got a vague recollection of looking at a thread on RM Web where somebody had done something like this with a ready-to-run J94, converting it to 2 mil Finescale. I can't remember who it was, or I might have got the story about what they did with the wheels wrong, but I've got a recollection of reading a thread where somebody certainly used the original wheels in some sense to make a 2 mil fine scale.
What Keith had done was to turn it all off the back of the wheel.
Yeah.
So you keep the front,
Yeah.
and you've taken the flange off the back.
Yeah.
So that when he's taken that off, I think that it's almost made it sort of change the gauge size, so it's
Yeah.
correct for
Yeah.
2 mil.
I think if you left
new
the
tyres on.
Yeah.
if you left the full thickness of the wheel and just put the tyre on the outside edge,
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
you'd have a bit behind.
Yes.
Yes.
You'd have to make your frames quite narrow. You couldn't have
Yes.
you couldn't have your frames. You probably have
Unless
to
you shave off the back.
yeah, I'd say but shaving the back off might.
But he didn't bother with that. He put these into the old dapole frames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because he didn't turn it right down to the axle,
Yeah.
so it just left that little bit almost as a hub
Yeah.
that sort of got the gauge right and kept it without too much play within those frames.
Yeah.
But there's another one where he then sort of put the association etched frames on the outside to make up the width.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of cunning moves that he had that I just think, oh Keith, if only you were still around to ask you what you've done.
Yeah. I did many years ago. I did scratch build a Great Central, an Elding ECR 062 tank in EM gauge, and I did that split frame because I just like trying different things and I experiment with things, and I found it to be a lot of extra work for very little reward. And so ever since then I've gone back to conventional pickups on things, and to be fair, I've never had any problem with getting adequate pickups with fine wire wipers. You know, it's never been a problem in 4mm scale. Would it be a problem in 2mm scale? I don't know. You know, I've never done it. I've never tried it. But again, Dapole and Graham Farish and whatever, you know, there's run all right with them.
Possibly only a problem with passive carrying wheels.
Yeah.
And there's no problem in really doing that split frame.
You could make a
and
split
using Simpson splits.
Yeah, you could make a split frame bogie or pony truck or a tender quite easily. It's the driving wheels,
Yes.
and it's the idea of having a solid block. You know, I'm not entirely sure when you're forcing wheels into muffs, how square do they actually? You know, do they push in dead square? There's a little wobble on the U wheels. You can see them.
Yeah.
Just a little wobble, which the wheels themselves look very true. So it's got to be the way they've gone into the muffs.
But it used to be a problem with our first wheels, the white metal centred wheels, which obviously are all softer in the spokes. And if you push too hard on those, they can go.
Yeah, but I certainly think certainly the availability of good small motors and gears has come on leaps and bounds from the days when it was a big motor in the tender, and it's the only place you could go. So I think it would be an interesting
I'm not
experiment.
very sure about the good motors these days, Tony, because I mean these little cheap Chinese cans that you can buy, so 8mm ones, they work brilliantly. And if you super glued it in and it failed, you just go chuck it away and put a new one in.
I know Mike Edge is using these N20 motors that he gets them from China for about £3 a time. With a gearbox already on.
Oh yes.
And he's recently experimented putting these little motors in O-gauge locos, and the gearing on them so good that they'll work perfectly well on a decent load in O-gauge.
Yeah.
And you know, say £3.50 a pop, and you can get different arrangements of gearboxes, inline and bevel ones and skew and right hand.
I was going to say that. Why do we persist with worms and gears?
Tradition.
Skew gears.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to make it go round and round.
Years ago, Stuart Hine built a castle. It was in Holney days, and he had spur gears, no wheels. It was a relatively big diameter, short length motor in the firebox, and just a row of spur gears going down. I mean, he couldn't get it to go around corners at all either.
No.
But in terms of the gearing,
Yeah.
that was how he got that.
Yeah. So I do wonder whether it's time to, whether there's, you know, there will be no doubt people somewhere trying these things.
Well, we still think we're avant-garde doing split frames, of course. Picking up off every wheel.
So anyway, so that's where we're up to with these two little babies. They might be finished one day. You never know.
I think they're just wonderful. And thank you very much, Tony, for telling us about them and entertaining us for the afternoon. And long may our association with the Oval continue.
Thank you. I hope it does.
I'm very proud to have examples of your modelling on it.
Yeah.
And well, you're providing an increasing proportion of the locomotive stock.
Yeah.
So,
One day there might be three.
anyway, Tony, thank you very much for coming back and talking to us again.
My pleasure.
And being a friend of Two Mills.
So there are a few models on the table there. Most people have probably had a look at them already. Scratch built LNER J16 O gauge. Kit built LNER D9, which again, learning new things. I'm making a set of inside motion for that for the first time. Scratch built Millwall extension railway 240. The 2mm locos we've talked about. And I've actually finished an engine. A Drury 04 in O gauge from a connoisseur models kit, which was a lovely kit.
To finish with some stills of the locomotives Tony had on demonstration. First up is the LNER J16 in O gauge, followed by the D9 LNER with inside motion, also O gauge. There's the inside motion for it. Then the Millwall Extension Railway 240, which could almost be 2mm scale, but is 4mm scale, of course. The one he's finished, the Drury 04, again in O gauge. And then the two locos that have been the subject of his presentation. This is the Malsall Mogul, the U-class, the chassis. There it is with its boiler, firebox and smokebox waiting to be attached. And finally, the lovely Dean Goods.